insightful knowledge on your oil wealth. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's episode of Guyana's Oil and You. I'm your hostess, senior journalist at Kaieteur News, Kiana Wilburg, and tonight we have a fresh face to the discussion this evening. We have the honor of having Ms. Amanza Walton Desir, APNU AFC Member of Parliament and Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs. Ms. Walton Desir, thank you very much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Kiana. You know, I follow your programs very closely, and I must say, I'm very impressed with the way you have acquitted yourself as it relates to the oil and gas sector. And so thank you for having me, and feel free to call me Amanza. That is my God-given name, so please feel free to use it.
Thank you so much for that. So, Amanza, we have quite a few burning issues that we'd love to get your perspective on. So I'll jump right in. You're one of the fresh faces to politics, to the political scene. What is your take on the sense of humility, sense of duty of policy leaders? Is it where you expected it would be?
Frankly, no, it's not. And I'll say that I'm of the firm belief that when it comes to serving people and serving the people of Guyana, there's no room for arrogance. There is no room for arrogance. And, you know, we live in a society that is multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious. There's three main religions, and each of them really, they do provide guidance as to how we as leaders ought to operate. You know, the Hindu religion teaches us about dharma and a set of principles that really should be employed to govern your life, and it talks about selflessness. The Quran talks about Allah being with the people who do good, and you find, for example, in the Christian religion, Jesus himself took water in a bowl and washed his disciples' feet. I think the ultimate picture of service. And so we have to bear in mind at all times that leadership requires humility. I'll give you a personal example that I experienced over the last few days. You know, we had this issue where the president was at the UN, and we were on a morning program, and we waded into him about the pronunciation of Turkey. And we had we dug into him, but the reality was that we did not have all of the facts. So what did we do? I mean, the very same day, I put up a note on my Facebook page indicating, hey, look, Turkey has in fact changed its name at the level of the UN. And so going forward, the UN is going to be using the new spelling and pronunciation. And then on the show, we issued an unequivocal apology because we did not get it right. And so, you know, that is what you do. I think that is what humility is about, being able to acknowledge when you are wrong and course correct. So I really do believe that we have leaders in our society who have these attributes. Unfortunately, I don't see it displayed in the manner that it should be in our public life, and that is regrettable. And it is something that I hope, as we continue to grow as a nation and as a people, that we, you know, see fitting to employ some more of it. QC, for example, did an ad that they got some feedback on that wasn't, the feedback wasn't quite complimentary. They pulled it and they apologized. That is what I am encouraged by, that when we make mistakes, we admit where we go wrong and we pick ourselves up, we learn from it, and we continue building this nation.
I hear you on that, Amanza, that at the core of leadership, you must set an example. You must be able to say when you are wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you for that. Now, one of the burning issues that's been on the minds of many of our stakeholders and readers of the Kaieteur News is the role of the political opposition in the oil and gas sector. And before I delve into that, I want to just ask for an understanding of your principle of where you sit in the political opposition. Do you think that it is the role of our leaders to try to get as much as possible from our resources?
Absolutely. Once you take a decision that you are going to exploit your natural resources, the issue then becomes how do you do that? And you do it with sensitivity to the environment. You have to pay attention to the environmental concerns. You have to pay attention to the safety concerns, as well as you have to pay attention to what can eventuate from the exploitation of these resources. So you have to ensure that your systems and your structures are set up. Now, let's be frank. Exxon is a multi-billion corporation. It's huge, if not trillion, I'm not sure. But they have a fiduciary duty to who? Their shareholders. And they have to ensure the long-term profitability of their company for their shareholders. And so they have a vested interest in pursuing the interests of their shareholders. The government of Guyana has a fiduciary duty to the people of Guyana. And therefore, we have to look to the government the same way Exxon shareholders would look to the management of Exxon. We have to look to the government to play a role in ensuring that we receive maximum returns.
Thank you for that, Amanza. On that note, do you believe that the role of the government and the opposition when it comes to maximizing value, do you think that that should be priority above the differences that both sides may have?
Priority
Getting
in
the
terms
most of our
the-
resources, both sides holding a united front and getting the most value that we can from our resources. Do you think that that trumps the independent issues that you may have?
It absolutely must. I mean, we're dealing with $1 trillion corporation here, as we said before, and they have equipped themselves with all of the experts. They have equipped themselves with the best in the field, and it is therefore very, very important that at a national level, just as we approach the issue of our territorial sovereignty, that we approach the issue of the management of our natural resources and the exploitation of our natural resources in a unified manner. You will appreciate that not having a united front does provide room for us to be set one against the other. But if as a nation we are saying, look, government and opposition, this is what we want, this is what we are looking for the people of Guyana, then there's no room for anybody to come in and to set us one against the other. No, what are you giving as against what are you giving? So absolutely, it should be a national priority, having a national approach to dealing with our oil and gas sector. We have never been here before, Kiana. This is new to us. This is new to us. But we do have the benefit, if we want to, of the experiences of other nations. You know, Trinidad, Nigeria, they are very good examples of what can go bad. And then you have, on the other hand, you have Norway and Singapore as examples that really they provide good examples of first class operations and how you manage that delicate balance between exploring and exploiting your natural resources over and balance that with the environmental and other concerns. So we really do have the choice to learn from these nations and not have to have the painful experiences ourselves. The question is, do we have a government that has the political will to do that? And from all indications, it appears not. And so I think we are in to learn these lessons the very hard way, unfortunately.
On that note, Amanza, I'd like to ask you, from your observation of how the government has been managing the oil and gas sector, what's perhaps one or two immediate things that you would have expected to be affected at this point in time to maximize value from the oil and gas resources?
I think the first thing would have been a national conversation, beginning in the National Assembly. It has to be remembered at all times that this government holds a one-seat majority. And that does not at any time, or should not, equate to 100% of the say. And so I think at the level of Parliament, there is an opportunity to set a legal framework in place that ensures that Guyanese get the best. That is at the bare minimum where we can start. Another thing that I would have liked to see is greater emphasis being played on the strengthening of the institutions that will govern oil and gas. We're not seeing that. We're seeing quite the contrary. So at a bare minimum, some type of cooperative approach to the development of the legal and institutional framework for the management of this sector, at a bare minimum.
Thank you for that response there, Amansa. Now, one of the other topical matters that we have observed at Kaieteur News is that there seems to be a desire from many civil society groups and stakeholders for more information from the oil and gas sector. What is the opposition's perspective on this, or are you satisfied with where the level of accountability is from government?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The level of transparency and accountability is abysmal. For example, the EITI has collapsed. Transparency seems to be of little to no concern to this government, and it is serious cause for worry, because unless you make information readily available, then you open yourself to criticisms of corruption, of malfeasance, and all of these things. So at a bare minimum, there has to be transparency. Accountability, this government does not believe itself accountable to the people of Guyana. And it's manifested in how they operate on a daily basis.
Are there specific examples pertaining to the oil and gas sector that feed or inform your conclusion that the government is not open to making itself transparent or accountable to the people?
Not only in the oil and gas sector, the lack of information, the unwillingness to engage in public debate in the National Assembly, the answers that we receive as members of Parliament when we ask questions, pertinent questions, these are some of the hurdles that you actually face in trying to get information and trying to get positions that you can relate to your constituency. We are elected representatives of the people. And the government has to understand that they are accountable to the people of Guyana. We talk a lot about servant leadership, but it's not just lip service. It's an actual thing, and it looks like being of service to the people, not just your friends and your family, but for all the people. And so they have to do a far better job of providing information when it is asked for. It will mean strengthening the capacity of the Commissioner of Information so that when information is requested, people get it in a timely and in a transparent manner. So there's a lot of work to be done there to improve that transparency and accountability. You know, we have to, I think, Kiana, resolve at this juncture. We're at such a critical juncture in our existence as a country that if we do not resolve to get some things right, we are going to pay the price for it down the road. And so there are certain fundamental things. The fact that we have fallen on the transparency index 2 places since 2020 ought to tell you the difficulties that you're having with transparency and accountability in this country.
Thanks for that, Amanza. And on that note, I want to just make a segue with our discussion into the effectiveness of Parliament. Parliament is considered one of the key mechanisms that politicians can use to have oversight of how the government of the day is managing the respective sectors. How effective has Parliament been in being a check and balance on what the government is doing?
Kiana, I will say this. Parliament, if we allow it to function in the manner that it was intended to function, will be very effective. Unfortunately, that is not what is happening. And Guyanese just have to follow the proceedings whenever they call sessions of Parliament to see that what I'm saying is correct. First off, you have a government that calls Parliament at its whims and fancies. We have gone for in excess of 90 days without having a sitting of the National Assembly at such a critical juncture in our country's development. 90 days and no session of the National Assembly. And then when you do have Parliament, the attitude is that you will have your say and we will have our way. So there is no room, or there's very little room for the intent, the original intent of Parliament to be manifested. It is a place where the duly elected representatives of the people can go and have the concerns of their constituencies ventilated. What we see happening, however, is a speaker that makes no bones about being biased. The evidence is out there. And to compound that, you have a level of arrogance. I'll give you an example. You know that questions to the minister, they're one of the key tools in the arsenal of an MP to get answers. We had a situation where, for example, there was a trawler licensing issue, and the responsible shadow minister asked, could you please indicate to us the process that you used? And the response that you got was that it is the same process that you used when you were issuing firearm licenses. And that was what was actually said.
So an official response was not provided?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. And that is the angst that we have as members of Parliament. Another thing that really does indicate that this government has no intention of being accountable is the fact that they have tinkered with the formula of the Public Accounts Committee. The Public Accounts Committee has always been Parliament's primary mechanism to oversee government expenditure. And from its inception, it has always been configured in a manner where the chairmanship of the committee goes to the opposition, and the rules have been that any 3 members once present can proceed with the work of the PAC. Earlier this year, the government changed that to say that you have to have, the chairman must be present, members from the other side must be present for the work to continue. What has happened since then? They've not been able to be quoried, so the PAC has not been able to meet. And this is what we mean when we talk about this lack of commitment to transparency. So the work of the committee is stalled, and then now we're told that they're going to be bringing a motion that will prevent the committee from dealing with the issues in an amalgamated manner. Now, that does not appear, to me at least, to be testimony of any person interested in transparency, etc. And so we continue to see a whittling away, a breaking away of the guardrails of our democracy. Look at the Natural Resources Fund, for example. The robustness of the previous legislation has been done away with, and we are now living with the result of it. And if I challenge anyone to say to us that our Natural Resources Fund is now being better managed, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You have a situation where it is now, there's now a far less level of scrutiny than we had initially envisaged. There's a far less level of scrutiny than the best practice advises. And so that has to be cause for concern. So you have all of the indicators that we are not allowing Parliament to function. And I think that it's a result, Kiana, of the inability of the PPP administration to develop a win-win paradigm. We have to be able, as a National Assembly, to lead by example and to begin to craft solutions that result in a win-win. And that affects the effectiveness of the National Assembly.
Amanda, I'd like to just ask some questions that pivot off of your response.
Sure.
And firstly, I'll ask you a two-part question. Now, you spoke about the withering away of the guardrails of democracy. Parliament is known as the home of democracy. What I'm getting from you is that the home of democracy is no longer what it was really intended to be.
Absolutely not.
Okay. And with Parliament being the home of democracy, there are complaints that have been raised in several sections of the media, including Kaieteur News, about the posture, the behavior, the manner in which politicians engage each other over the floor. And this is not to point fingers at any one person. I have seen the speaker in my reporting, in my observation as well, point to both sides of being not in conformity with the standards, the level of decorum that is expected. What is your honest take, your frank take on the exchanges that happen in Parliament, that happen across the floor? Do you think it really augurs well for the type of healthy discussion that is supposed to happen at that institution?
It does not. We absolutely have to improve it.
Okay.
I say that unequivocally. Again, it is about the paradigm with which we come to this thing. And so there has to be improvement. We owe it to the people of Guyana to lift the standard of debate, to lift the level of accountability that we demonstrate in the National Assembly. I have no bones about making that very, very clear. We have to be able to appreciate that we are living in different times, and that now the proceedings of Parliament are there for every Guyanese to see. And
Right.
we have to be able to be cognizant of that and lift the standard of debate. We owe the people of Guyana no less.
On that note, you spoke about the Natural Resource Fund legislation. There are two questions I'd like to ask you about that. The political opposition has been heavily criticized for its protest, the manner in which it protested the government's discussion, the government's move to pass the NRF legislation. How do you respond to criticisms that the political opposition, defiled the home of democracy in the manner in which it protested?
It's a case of it's the same result if you do or if you don't. Because I think this situation really does provide an excellent example of the fine line that the opposition is always called to walk when it comes to representing the interests of the people of Guyana. You have one sector that says, why are you all going there to waste your time? They will do what they want anyway. There's a segment of society that actually very strongly believes that. And then there is another sector that says, you are not representing us fiercely enough. You're allowing the PPP to do what they want. And then there's another segment that says, you have to go in there and you have to represent and you have to put in the work. And there may be merit in all of them. And so the opposition has to constantly walk the line and balance all of those competing interests. It's interesting to me that the government does not appear to be held to a similar standard. And I think that is where we do ourselves a disservice. Because if you're going to call out the goose, you got to call out the gander. What's good for the goose must be good for the gander. And that is where I think all of the voices that express these notions have an important role to play. Don't just call it out when you see the person in the opposition doing it, but call it out when you see the person in the government doing it. Our female MPs have faced serious and very disrespectful comments. And you see the cherry picking happening. And people who are normally vocal about what the opposition should and shouldn't do, nary a word. And so I'm saying that is a delicate balance that we always have to negotiate, and what has happened is the very disproportionate reaction, I think. MPs are now barred and without salary, etc. And you had somebody that made a crass and crude sexual remark to a female MP and got away with a slap on the wrist. And so that really indicates, I think, some of the imbalances that we have to correct. We have to be a lot more even-handed. We have to look at what would provoke reactions and not just the reaction itself. We have to become a little more balanced and a little more rounded in our assessment and our analysis of issues.
So in your view, the reaction of the opposition towards the move by the government to allow the passage of the NRF, given what you've said, for you it was justified?
I'm saying I understand it.
Okay.
I'm saying that I completely understand it. And I'm also saying that we have now the benefit of hindsight. And you have now the fact that the NRF is being plundered. And that is exactly what we were warning about. Because now you do not have the benefit of, for example, knowing which are the projects, the monies from the NRF, what are the projects that this money is being put towards. The idea of a natural resources fund, as you know more than most people, Kiana, is to make sure that the current exploitation of our natural resources does not happen to the detriment of future generations. That is, we have to be able to manage the income that we get from it in such a manner that the future generations, that the Constitution says are entitled to the benefit and the patrimony of this nation, that they actually benefit. And that is not happening now. And this is what we were warning about. Whether you agree or disagree with what or how it was gone about, the reality is that what we were warning about has come to pass. And so you have a plundering of the natural resources fund without any level of accountability. And you have a government that insists on insulting the intelligence of the people of Guyana to say, oh, we pass it through Parliament. What you do is that you simply transfer sums from the fund into the consolidated fund. That doesn't amount to scrutiny. How do we know the national development priorities that you are using this money to address? We don't. We can't.
The opposition's position that I'm gathering here is that there should be a sort of review process before this money is transferred. The people should know through Parliament what government wants to take this money and use it for.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That was how it was in the previous iteration of the bill, because cognizant of the fact that the reason for the Natural Resource Fund is to do exactly what I previously posited, we were of the view that it had to be spent on national development priorities, so that if you were going to identify a project that this would fund, that project had to meet certain criteria, or else you run the risk of what is happening now, where it's being used for budget support.
I want to ask you about the changes, some of the amendments that were made, because most of the Natural Resource Fund was kept by the government. What is your take on some of the amendments that were made to inform the new legislation that they have? For example, the government said that one of the key things that they sought to do was simplify the formula for transferring monies to the consolidated fund. Is it that the political opposition is not in agreement with any of the changes that were made? Do you think any of the changes, some were okay, some were not? What's your take on the changes?
But this is precisely why the call of the political opposition was, let us take this to a select committee. We're not saying that everything that you want to do is wrong, but let's understand the rationale behind it. Let's debate whether that is in the best interests of the people of Guyana. Let us take it to a select committee where we can sit down together and make sure that we come out with the best possible product. You may have had criticisms of it. Yes, let's hear it. We have criticisms, but at all times, our posture was send it to a select committee so that we get the best possible technical advice, that we come up with a superior product that can satisfy the entire National Assembly. That was rejected. That was rejected out of hand. And the PPP saw no reason that they had to come to a select committee to come to any form of consensus on what the legislation should look like.
Thank you for that. We had quite a mouthful there to talk about
I
on
know.
Parliament. But I also want to delve into the role of the political opposition in managing from its side, providing scrutiny of the oil and gas sector. What is your take on the role of the APNU AFC? How has the coalition been working together to put the best minds in place to come up with the best recommendations? How have you guys been formulating, strategizing to provide scrutiny of this sector?
Well, it is important to know that we are doing it. And with the resources that we are putting together, and you would have heard the leader of the opposition refer to this on a number of occasions, that there are technical working groups that we have convened to come up with proper policy positions to propose. Whether or not it will be accepted, given the challenges that I just expressed to you that we face in the National Assembly, is one thing. Another thing that we have been doing is going into our constituencies and educating the people, because we find that, again, there is a lack of information. There's a lack of because of the lack of information, I should say, the level of understanding is not where we want it to be. And so we are taking steps to go into our communities and to have group discussions. on the oil and gas sector. We field questions from our constituencies and provide the best possible answers. We hear from them. What is it that you think we should be doing? How is it that you want to see the windfall that we'll receive from oil and gas benefiting this nation and the people? And so we have been playing our role, but again, we are heavily curtailed, and the challenges that civil society as well have indicated that they're facing in terms of the lack of information, the lack of transparency. These are very, very much to the fore of the challenges that we are facing, but we continue to make recommendations. We continue to engage experts that are available to us to come up with positions, and we make them public. You would know that whenever we have a point to make on an issue, we make it. And we say that we've been studying it and this is what we feel may be a good approach. Does the government take it on? No. But that does not mean that we will stop advocating and we will stop educating the people.
Thank you, Amanza. Now, you spoke about the the group meetings that you would have. What are some of the issues that you've been asked to speak on from members of society? What's really, from what you've gathered, what are some of the key areas citizens seem to be most concerned about?
Their bread and butter. Bread and butter issues are what the majority of Guyanese are now concerned about. You take a walk around in some communities, and the feedback that you get is that we are barely making it. The cost of living is so high. Our salaries are so low that we don't even enjoy a livable wage anymore. And so that really is at a fundamental level their concerns, because Kiana, you would appreciate that when you have to be concerned with your survival and the survival of your family, you hardly have time to address your mind to anything else. And so that continues to be a cause for serious concern for the opposition. And we advocate it. We keep advocating it. We advocate a holistic approach to employment and to human development. But instead, what you're seeing is a very biased and discriminatory approach to human development in Guyana. And everywhere we go, we hear it. And so it continues to be of concern, of serious concern. And that is the paramount thing. We can't afford the prices in the shop. My salary, what it used to buy, it's not buying anymore. What do I do? Where do I go? And the government that controls the purse strings of this nation continues to be unresponsive.
Amranza, I'd like to ask you another two-part question.
Sure.
There have been criticisms that the APNU AFC is perhaps too hung up on the elections results, that it is wasting valuable time still being stuck on this particular issue, as opposed to taking a position of being the government in waiting. How do you respond to those criticisms? I'll start with that first.
Well, who says that? Who is this criticism coming from? You know, it's very interesting. So that's the first that's my first reaction to it. Who is saying that? There's evidence to the contrary. You know, we're not hung up on requesting SOPs when we are in government and in the seat of government on the basis of statements of recount, but every occasion we're requesting to show your SOPs, to show your SOPs. So who is really obsessed? We're not the people running around convening commissions of inquiry into matters that are engaging the attention of the courts. So who is really obsessed with it? The APNU AFC has said that it will explore every legitimate means to bring a resolution to this issue. And you'll recall that we were advised that the way to do that is through an elections petition. We have filed them. They're before the courts. But you have a government that has a vested interest in not having that proceed. So who is really obsessed? You have the Attorney General making wild statements in the media, requesting documentation from GCOM to investigate communication and correspondence. So who is really obsessed? We have to be able to assess and analyze these issues fairly. A matter of constitutional importance cannot be done away with on the basis of expediency or of convenience. And when you take a matter to court, it is important not only for the present moment, but it is a matter of precedent. It is a matter of you injecting certainty into the law, which is one of the foundational elements of any legal system. It's a matter of you clarifying the jurisprudence. So this is why we have it in the courts, because we want these matters to be authoritatively settled. The PPPC doesn't have that interest. They're more interested in the extrajudicial, as it were, avenues, the sensational avenues of a commission of inquiry, without thinking about the fact that the very thing that they're asking the commission of inquiry to do, we requested that GCOM do. We requested that GCOM undertakes a review of what happened because we have to correct the system. That was done away with. But you are convening a commission of inquiry. Really? And we are the people who are obsessed with this. We've put it in the hands of the court. We are asking the court to hear it. And that is where we are on the matter. We're not the ones engaging in extrajudicial, and I use that because it connotes exactly what I'm trying to say, outside of the legal system. They're criminal charges that they have people up on for the last 2 years. And the matters have been unable to proceed. Why not focus your energies on that? But you want to have a trial in the court of public opinion and not have the matter settled once and for all by our courts, which will only redound to our advantage. So, you tell me who's obsessed.
On that note, I'd like to ask you if you believe that the political opposition's approach is working in its favor, the manner in which it is handling certain issues, the scrutiny that you are expected to provide at the level of Parliament, outside of Parliament. Do you think it's working? Or do you think better could be done?
There's always room for improvement. There is absolutely always room for improvement. But we have been seeing results. Kiana, you will recall it when we started pointing out that there was a pattern that this government was engaging in as it relates to who got fired from positions. And that pattern adhered to the line of ethnicity. We were told, y'all are blowing things out of proportion, everything is about race, etc. But we are seeing it manifested every day. And we kept calling it to the attention of the people of Guyana. And now it is not a case where it is the opposition alone that is observing that this is happening. You have civil society that has made the observation. You have activists who are making the observation. And so we are seeing progress. Look, we continue to maintain that this government refuses to act in an equitable manner. You've noticed that the diplomatic community has now taken the posture that we support inclusivity. We support the patrimony of Guyana being for all Guyanese. We support the equitable development. And so I believe that our advocacy is seeing fruit, because at the end of the day, our concern is that every Guyanese, irrespective of their race or creed, be able to benefit in an equitable manner. And we make no apologies for that level of advocacy. And so I think, yes, it is bearing fruit. There is always room for improvement, always. And this is what we will continue to strive to do, to readjust, to re-strategize as is necessary. Because you appreciate that this is never stagnant. It is dynamic, and so you always have to be able to move when you're required to move. But we will continue to build. We will continue to be a very strong opposition. We will continue to use the courts, because I emphasize the importance of judicial settlement of these issues and the importance of it to Guyana's future. So we will continue our representation of the people.
Thank you, Amanza. And this brings me to the conclusion of our program tonight. On that note, I'd like to ask you for your take on the government's overall management of the economy. They've been in office 2 years. What's your take? Is there any positive that strikes you? I know that the political opposition has spoken a lot about the many things that they don't find favor with, that they believe needs to have a better approach towards it. But is there any positive in your eyes? And again, what's your overall take of their management?
Well, I'll start with the overall take. They get an F from me. They get a failing grade. Look, you go to the average Guyanese man or woman, the average single parent, and it's a struggle. And to the extent that we are not addressing that, we have a problem. The paradigm of governance of this government is a problem. The friends, family, and favorite paradigm. This notion that personality can replace our institutions. It's a problem. And it redounds to the disadvantage of every Guyanese. I'm not saying that you can't change management, but for heaven's sake, do not break down the institutions. And this is when you look around Guyana, this is what you are seeing. The cult of personality is replacing institutions. Look at your sector, the oil and gas sector, for example. If President Ali were keen on showing leadership, I believe that his focus would have been on strengthening the energy department. It has been done away with virtually. What has it been replaced with? The vice president, a few of his close friends. You have a natural resources minister who's clearly out of his depth, and a non-functioning EPA. And so you see the breakdown of the institutions that are intended to deliver for the people of Guyana. And so they don't get a passing grade for that. You have a situation where personalizing the management of our oil sector is compounded by a vice president that has, international reputation issues now, out of Sugate, etc. How does that engender confidence in potential investors? What are the implications of that on this upcoming oil block auction that we're saying? People are of the view that it's already rigged, because you have people dealing with it who have been found manifestly to have issues relating to their integrity in public office. So all around you're seeing a whittling away. Look at the police force. The police force does not enjoy the confidence of Guyanese. And frankly, they probably are at the point where they need international supervision. So there's a breakdown of law and order. There is a breakdown of just a sense of propriety and of decency. And there's an absolute absence of willingness on this government's part to come up with win-win solutions where every Guyanese feels that they are a part of this thing and that they're benefiting, and not that all of the economic empowerment is happening over there and I am over here and I am excluded. And this is why I have a difficulty with this plastering of the sore of one Guyana. Because it sounds more, and every day you see it, it more sounds like a tourism slang to attract tourists than an actual ideal of one people, one nation, one destiny. So they do not get a passing grade from me. Positives, there are some positives. One of the things that I am happy to see, particularly as it relates to social services, and I've gone publicly and said that Minister Prasad, she is unrolling and unveiling some very, very good initiatives. The last one we spoke about was the initiative to have street children off of the streets. We have even said that we will be happy to partner to do it because they're issues that are bipartisan. They're issues that don't need to have a political flair to it. And taking our children off of the streets, make sure that they are in schools, is one of them. Rolling out of the programs relating to interpersonal violence, those types of programs, we commend. I think there are some developments in health that I'm happy to see, but I would love to see more of an emphasis being placed on preventive care and primary care. So there are some positives, but overwhelmingly, they have to absolutely do better. Guyanese deserve better. They deserve more. Every Guyanese. It cannot be that the patrimony of this nation is being shared to friends, family, favorites, cronies. But this government has to humble itself, change course, and begin to engage the opposition and begin to engage the people of Guyana in a more respectful manner. You know, they talk about, we like to race bait, and we seem obsessed with this issue of race, but we are not the people that are going into communities and cherry picking which communities get financial aid. For example, you have a situation where NDCs across the country have received a $4 million cleanup grant, except those NDCs where the leadership is from the coalition. That's not our doing. Without fail, in every region. In Region 4, for example, none of the NDCs whose leadership come from the coalition have received the $4 million grant. Did we make that up? Are we racist for exposing it? No. And so when the president talks about bringing evidence of discrimination, there it is. It's right in your face. Why would the four NDCs not receive this grant? And I'm not talking about the subvention, because I noted the Minister of Local Government obfuscating in the press. I'm not talking about the subvention. I'm talking about this cleanup grant that was given to NDCs where the leadership comes from the PPPC. That is wrong, and it must be called wrong, and it must be corrected. And so until those things are corrected, Irfan Ali's One Guyana is it's empty rhetoric. So that's just one example in a slew of many that we can give you, where you're seeing rampant, just a rabid discriminatory approach. So no, they don't get a pass. They absolutely don't get a pass.
Amanda, thank you very much for your perspectives. It really was a pleasure to have you here on the program, a fresh face from the political opposition. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to extend an invitation to other members of the APNU AFC to be part of the conversation on oil and gas, because we at Kaieteur News are of the belief that everyone should have a seat at the table to offer their perspectives on this very critical industry. Everyone has a role to play in a sector that will ultimately decide our future for the better or for the worse.
Absolutely.
So the conversation, having everyone involved, is very important. And Amanza, I'd like to extend an invitation to have you back on the program again for us to talk, to continue this discussion at a time and date available.
Absolutely. Hey,
to you.
Anytime. I'm so grateful that you placed an emphasis on the importance of conversation. Because that is how we come away from the table with a superior product, as it were. And there's no point of view that is invalid.
Right.
There's no point of view that is invalid. What does the Desiderata say? There will always be greater or lesser persons, and even the dull and ignorant have a story. And so every point of view is valid and must be brought to the table and, given consideration. And if you don't go down a particular road, it must be with the understanding of why that path wasn't chosen. And there's where the issue of transparency comes in. But at all times, a place at the table is absolutely important, a place at the national table. And so I'd be happy to come by at any time.
Thank you very much again, Amanza.
Awesome.
To our listeners and viewers on Facebook Live and as well on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us this week. It's been a very interesting conversation here with Ms. Amanza Walton Desir, APNU AFC, Member of Parliament and Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs. We do hope to have you back with us same time, same place, as we continue the discussion on oil and gas and its management. Do take care and please continue to be safe. Ms. Amanza, do get home safely.
Thank you, my dear.